First, I will note that everybody on the commission is here in person. Thank you for joining us. And the first item on our agenda is to approve the minutes of June 7th and 20th, 2022 meetings. I would entertain a motion if anyone has one. I have a motion by Herbst and a second by Robinson. Any discussion? Mr. Jean.
This is with regards to the 20th.
Okay.
I just want to make sure the motion that we made supported both agenda item 1 and 3. Because I asked, I think at the meeting, and I don't think there was any discussion about it, does this motion, do we have to go back and approve agenda item 1, if I remember correctly? So.
Okay. We can investigate that. And if we need to approve other things, I guess, are we still comfortable approving it, or do we want to hold those over until next time? It's up to this body.
I'm comfortable approving it, but just look at that, make sure that, because I think the motion intended to do item number 1 and the policy of agenda item number 3. That's how I remember it.
That motion was taken under number 3, Joe? Yeah.
Do we feel confident that it's a matter of housekeeping to make sure that that's in there? Okay. All right. So if we feel confident that we'll make sure that that's updated. Any other comments? Otherwise, those in favor of approving the June 7th and 20th, 2022 meeting minutes can signify by saying aye. 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 Any opposed? Okay. Thank you very much. We are going on to item number 2, Director's Report. I will pass it over to you, Eric.
Yeah, a little bit shorter report for this month, but if any of the commissioners have any questions, mostly on staffing and, and construction progress.
Mr. Robinson.
So Eric, in light of the situation that you have with it, have you given any thought about using limited term employees and trying to potentially bring back any of the retired people on a part-time basis to help?
We haven't looked at bringing back retired people, limited basis, and I guess advertising for LTEs, no. In other divisions, we have hired temporary employees, but that's more clerical staff, not necessarily skilled labor. That's a little bit more of a challenge to fill some of those gaps. So.
I know you've got that 75-day wait, although that was waived with COVID. Do you still have that one from the time that they retire? And I know you've got some pending retirements. And sometimes people would be willing to do some things 10, 20 hours a week that might help with
Right.
some of that. So I would encourage that to be part of the array of options that you consider as we look at some of our skilled positions retiring, and maybe they may have an interest, subject to the parameters of Social Security.
Right. And then length of how long they've been retired. But yeah, I can bring that up to HR and have them look into that and see what's possible, John. Yep.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Mr. Jean?
This would be regarding the wastewater. Is the liquid portion fully operational at this point in time with that tank in front of the aeration cells? Liquid portion. Is it fully operational with the new units?
Can you turn on your mic, just so the public access? Thank
The
you.
anoxic zone the selector zone is in service and operating. All the aeration basin cells are in operation. We have a couple primary clarifiers out of service for some gate work, some valves on the headworks. So for the most part, yes, we're at probably 80% right now without the primaries in service. So, you're welcome.
Anyone else? Mr. Force?
Eric, on the water plant construction, was there a power outage and a gas line disruption? Can you report on that? Or can anybody?
I don't think so. We had an issue at the wastewater plant with a panel during that storm that was flooded out.
Yes.
but not at the water plant that I'm aware of. Do you know of anything, Steve, that?
Steve Opatic, Becker Hoppy Engineers. No, I'm not aware of anything at the water plant. In fact, I believe we put generators at all of the wells, and I believe those performed. There were power outages at a couple of the water supply wells, and I believe the standby generators kicked in and turned on.
The ones I'm referring to would have affected residents in the immediate area.
Not associated with our project directly. I do know there's another construction project in the area for constructing a water main that'll ultimately connect to the new plant, but I don't have any knowledge of that.
That's not part of your operation, it's someone
Correct.
else's operation?
Yes.
All right, and the temporary water system, would it also be associated with that other project?
That's correct, yes.
All right, thank you.
Was this a few weeks ago, by chance? A couple weeks ago?
I'm just hearing from a resident about this
Okay.
within the last 3 weeks, but I can't pinpoint any.
There was a power outage about I'm guessing 3 weeks ago.
I would say that's the right time frame. although I
Yes, we
can't be
did lose
precise.
power. We were doing quite a bit of chasing around town with generators and that, temporary power. The plant generators did run for approximately an hour and a half
Okay,
during
but
that time.
my question was designed to determine whether that was associated with our water plant project, and Steve's answer is no.
No,
Okay.
it was storm related, I believe.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else? Otherwise, we can go ahead and move on. We are now on item number 3, discussion and possible action, awarding the lead service line inventory analysis to CDM Smith, as was an option in their initial proposal.
Yeah, so as you remember, when we received proposals for the lead service line replacement plan, it selected Clark Dietz for that work. Just as a clarification on my memo that I put in, that says prepared in consultation with Donahue and Associates, that's incorrect. That was just a carryover, so I just want that for the record. There was an option that Clark Dietz provided for $20,120 for material inventory and documentation. And in your packet, I had given you the page from the proposal that shows those costs. Because of the time and effort it's going to take to document all of this and continue to move down and get a more accurate inventory, I am requesting that the commission approve that additional work at this point in time, our staff. We are not going to have staff to do that additional work in that time, and if we are going to do it, it's going to delay this project, which is, I don't think, in anybody's best interest. And so we do have a lot of the data over to Clark Dietz and CDM Smith. They've been going through it. As you've seen in previous, they've been kind of breaking the city out into priority areas. And so really now it's really diving into that information, doing some verifications. How do we verify that those are leads? How do we reduce the number of unknowns that we have? And so I basically have inspections, GIS, water, working on this with all the information, but to really start putting up spreadsheets and trying to dive into this, we just don't have the staff to do that. So we'd like to move ahead with having them take on that work as well.
Mr. Robinson?
So I assume that there's still work that will be done by your staff in order to support this?
Yeah, we will continue to have to provide them historical data, whether that's through inspections, whether that's through tap cards from the past. We're continually doing that as we have that information, but a lot of the information that we have, they don't necessarily say material types or, so we have to classify those as unknown, even though they're within that time frame. And so what we'd like to do is have a better idea, to have the consultant tell us, hey, in these areas, these are the years. And then if we can verify a few of the locations, which our staff will probably do in the field, then we should be able to group that entire, those blocks. That, yes, these indeed are lead, unless they've been noted as replaced, So But to break all that information down, break it down throughout the city for the blocks and the eras and things like that, I mean, our staff, we just can't sit down and spend that time.
So we've done some of the work, so is the cost the same as the initial proposal, or is it discounted based upon the work that's been done to date?
This would be adding an additional $20,120 to the contract.
But was that based on their original estimation of scope of work?
Yes.
And we have done some of that work? So we have not done any of that work?
No, we're always the ones who were going to provide them the data.
Okay.
Yeah, so, it's just they haven't done any of this breakdown or anything, because it was the expectation at the time that the city would do that. Yeah,
And how will we fund this?
through our operating budget, we would fund this. Yep.
Any other questions, or Mr. Jean?
Probably spin off of what John was asking. Would we expect there be additional funding over and above the $20,120?
Not at this time, but if it did, I mean, we would come back to the commission for approval if that were the case, if they felt that they weren't going to be able to get the work done. So what you'd be approving today, is if you went forward with this, would be the $20,120 and nothing more.
Any motion from anyone, or? Is
I'd
her-
like to make a motion for the $20,120.
Oh, I'm getting flail.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve of the $20,120 that is needed for the minimal material, I can't even read, inventory and documentation.
Alrighty, we have a motion. Do we have a second? I have a second by Jean. Any further discussion? Otherwise, all of those in favor of awarding the lead service line inventory analysis to CDM Smith for the just slightly over $20,000 can signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes. Thank you. We're now on to item number 4, discussion and possible action on utility staff wages and discussion on options for wage adjustments.
Yeah, so I tried to put together kind of the history of what we've been talking about over the last couple of months in commission meetings, and that's come up over the past couple of years, actually. And from the last meeting, we presented some numbers based on some compensation surveys that were done with AWWA, along with Wisconsin Rural Water. We also looked at a couple, comparable utilities, one smaller than us, one a bit larger than us, to try to see how we compare with similar job descriptions as well. The one response from the commission was, what are some of the options that we can do? Now, I had outlined a couple different options to look at that would be able to keep us within the pay structure that we're at, and still try to address the retention issues that we have, and also to possibly help with recruitment as well. And this is strictly just for wages. I had been talking to finance. I do not have a fiscal impact for each of these yet. And so I had talked with Mary Ann about that. So if any of these that you would like to see to move forward with, to see what that fiscal impact would be for this year, the remainder of this year, as well as oncoming years, we could put that together for you. Or if you wanted to have any other sort of arrangement or any other ideas on the wages. But I do think we are at a pretty critical situation on stabilizing our workforce. That, as you can see, we hired somebody just in May. They've already left. And then we have a serious lag time in hiring people coming back on. And so I think our first step is to stabilize the people that we have, to support that while we work on other ways, just in some of those things, like you had talked about, John, maybe LTEs, maybe some retired employees willing to come back for part-time in the interim under contract is something that we could look at too through human resources. But if we continue to bleed people, we're going to continue to fall behind. Even if we do become fully staffed, there's still 18 to 24 months before we'll be fully operational, and that's if we can keep those people, because they have to be trained before they can be on call. If they don't have CDLs, we have to train them on that with the new criteria. So there's a lot of things that that come into play even when we do become fully staffed. We also have signing a contract for a staffing analysis, which should be prepared before the final budget season for this year. That will come back to the commission with some recommendations on what staffing that we have, the levels that we have right now, and any needs or anything like that that we would possibly need for additional staff moving forward into the future. But that doesn't look at wages at all. That's just looking at our staff, how many FTEs that we should have.
Mr. Robinson?
So how does this approach compare to the overall approach of the city?
Right now, the city is, on council tonight, is looking at a market adjustment of the pay scales at 2%. So,
We would have under this a tiered system, one that are enterprise supported and one that is enterprise and levy supported, and you would be treating them differently. Aren't you concerned about
we wouldn't,
that?
John, because we're not changing the pay structure at all. All we're doing is giving people step increases within that pay structure. That's what's being proposed here. So if you were at, let's say you were at a step 4, this would say that you would get 1 step, so then the commission would be approving that individual or that employee would go to step 5.
So are you looking for approval today, or what are we, is this directional discussion? I'm concerned about not having a fiscal note and understanding the impact, given all of the other pressures that we have on our rates.
Sure. Yeah, if you, I mean, where we are with staffing, yeah, I would like approval. If you're not comfortable and are waiting for a fiscal impact, I can certainly bring that back in August for a decision. These proposals that I have in here, 1 and 2, they're items which I feel that could be implemented quickly based on a commission's decision. It works within the pay structure. Like I said, for those employees that are over midpoint and have at least 4 years, right? Because over the last 4 years, we've done a better job of hiring people within the pay scale where they should be. Prior to that, it seemed like we were hiring people very low based on trying to work with HR, and it was very challenging. And so if you wanted to say, if you wanted to make any alterations to that and say, well, anybody who, if they work for the city for 2 years rather than 4 years, or, if there's any changes on that, this could be different variations on that. But, would you like a fiscal impact on both of these, on different scenarios? I mean, are you willing to consider this at the August? I mean, if you're not willing to consider it, then yeah.
Well, one of my concerns is just the consistency within the city as an entity, and I think we have to look at how this plays with Department of Public Works and others, and I don't think you want to get into the position where we're trading people from one department to another and exacerbating problems, and you would well know that issue, given your position. I don't feel comfortable acting without an understanding of the fiscal ramifications. So I'm not adverse to making market share adjustments to reflect the realities of hiring today, because the county is going through that type of a study, and we're anticipating that it's going to have a significant cost to the county
Right.
to be competitive. But I don't think we can do it department by department or program by program. I think it's got to be a unilateral one across the city, and it's got to be done with full knowledge of what the costs are. My preference would be to get those costs and look at where we are, and if it even necessitates a special meeting, I'm okay with that.
I don't think we're going to get alignment within the city right now, John. Now, there is a market study that'll start, but it won't be implemented till '24, and the utility cannot wait until '24 to make some of these adjustments. And I think something needs to be done on the utility side. As you can see, just from the spreadsheet that I have in there, how far below we are from other comparable positions. We're not even close to competitive on many of our positions. And I think, from where I'm sitting as the director, I understand that there will be some friction with the other divisions, but I also know how important it is to maintain the utility, and we have requirements that we have to meet. And right now, we're in jeopardy of not meeting those. And so we're talking about corrosion control, lead service line replacement, all of these other regulations that are coming down on us. And if we continue to be short-staffed, we're just going to continue to be on a road to failure. And so we need to start taking action moving forward. And I believe that these are small steps, but I also believe that they will make an impact on us stabilizing our workforce. And so whatever information that you need to make a sound decision one way or another, I will prepare it. I will bring it back. I do believe that this is critical for both the water and the wastewater. I don't know if Scott.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add on to that, and maybe I wasn't clear in the director's report, but we are down to 2 techs and 1 plant operator and 1 relief operator at our plant. We could be 6 months away from having no technicians. You're going to have 1 plant operator and 1 relief operator. Those 2 operators are not going to operate every weekend. They're going to leave, and we're going to have nobody. So we're going to be doing contract operations, which is going to be 4 to 6 times more than what we're paying now. We could give our staff $10 an hour and still be ahead. I've been bringing this back since 2016. If you don't do something, the ship is going to sink.
I do think we need that financial analysis. I think that's important for us to make these decisions. And I also think it's important that when we're hiring, we're looking at what that is. We can hire people above midpoint. We can do that too. So I think that's important. We should hire people at their skill set. I know, and I think maybe talking to HR a little, like having some of that representation in this meeting will be important. I don't want to do things that view that we're undercutting the work that's going on right now. And I think we can gain alliances and we can have an impactful discussion when we have that data. Mr. Force.
Scott raised a couple of issues that were on my mind. I guess I would like to see some context here, and you kind of gave it when you said we're going to be out of people if this continues, but if we could have, and maybe we have that somewhere, then I'm just not aware of it. So at the Water Division, you have 1 person who has departed, and you have 2 retirements coming up. And I don't know those 3 positions. I don't know what the context is. Is that 3 of 6, 3 of 8, 3 of 9? I'm not sure. And on the wastewater plant, 2 vacancies. Again, I just for my own information, I'd like to know the context of that. Is that
Those are 3 of 3 for the technician positions, and we have 1 plant operator and 1 relief operator, which is a distribution maintainer relief operator.
well? Okay, I'd just like to see it on paper, maybe at our next meeting. So again, so I have some idea of the scope of the problem. You also made a statement that contract operations will be 4 to 10 times, and I'm just curious as to where that number is.
4 to 6, because we operate on a reasonable pay scale, where there's room for increases. Other utilities do that as well. Companies that come in and operate at a fee need to make money. So they're going to charge more, they're paying their staff more, they're going to have expert staff. I haven't run the numbers. Other communities I've talked to, the rates are much higher, communities that do have contract operations.
Well, I'm not advocating that. but it is a possibility. It is potentially another source of technical expertise that we would need. I would, and John and I were just talking about that, I would suspect that contract operators may be having the same issue with finding people, even though their pay scales may be better. And then, Eric, I mean, we've been talking about this for months, and the bottom line is always we're going to be advertising or we're going to be talking to HR. I don't know that we have a coherent plan to address this issue.
Not a comprehensive one, Jim, no.
And I'm uncomfortable because we don't.
Right. I think I'm in the same boat with you, Jim, that I'm uncomfortable as well. Trying to take it in steps as far as what, just looking at the utility and what is going to allow us a little bit of time so we can come up with, a plan. I understand the thought that we're breaking away from the city and how they set the wages. That isn't the intent here. I think the intent here is trying to ensure that we're able to run the utility properly, but yet, to keep the employees that we have, but yet work with every other department and try to figure out, and I think the city's been in discussions on this too with recruitment and retention, trying to figure out what is the path, for us to do this. I mean, the city itself has increased vacation. They've done some other things over the past year that I think have helped, and those will continue to help. But I think, I think the one thing that hasn't been addressed by the city or the utility is wages. And with where the city's at, it's still a couple years away. So.
And just, one final comment on that. I'm never absolutely positive that it's a money issue. I guess I'd like to know more about the folks who hire on with us and then leave, or the folks who apply but don't accept. Is it a money issue, or are there other issues at work? I understand that compensation is certainly important to retaining staff, and we absolutely want to do that. But I'm not always convinced that it's a money issue, and I'd like to know more about what is causing people to not accept positions or to leave positions once they've accepted them.
Some of that data does exist in HR, so we can work with Ann to get that to us.
Thank you.
Mr. Jean.
Well, there's no question, I've been a strong advocate that we've got to address this, and we have to do it. We can't wait for 2 years. We won't have a staff. We won't even have any staff at the rate that's going. But I did do, when I asked Mr. Brooks the question a meeting or two ago, I knew the answer, but he was regarding the starting salary for Medford. But I did my own mini research, and I was shocked. We are way behind. Starting wage, and I'm hoping that we can figure out a way to retain the existing core staff. That's extremely important, so we don't lose them. And I think that's your first goal, if I understand what you're saying.
Yes.
And somehow we need to do that. And I don't like to work against the other departments, but I'm very supportive of all city staff having a good living wage and feel good about their job and their salary. So I'm not saying we need to do them together. I'm just saying we need to do something for the utility, and it can't be 2 years from now. It'll be too late.
I do think it's important when we're talking about maybe some of the more rural utilities. I mean, some of those folks are doing things in addition to the utility work, right? So recognizing some of that, if they're engineers or electricians or whatever, it's going to be important. I think we do need some context. So I think we can bring this back and have a robust discussion. Again, if it needs to be a special meeting, let's talk about that. Make sure everybody who needs to be here is here. Mr. Robinson.
I think it would be worthwhile to have a summary of where we are in the context of where people are relative to the midpoint. And, just to get an understanding of our workforce, where we're at risk and where we're not, where we need to move. It's always tough to lose it's tough to hire somebody at a higher rate than somebody that's already working, because it breeds resentment over time, and I think we have to be careful. So if we could look at where we are relative to the market, relative to that experience and other things, I think those would be helpful tools to us to make that decision. But I think ultimately we need to know what the fiscal impact is too. That's part of our responsibility as commissioners. So if we could pull that together, even if it's a special meeting, I think it merits that type of focus and consideration if need be.
Okay.
Anyone else? All right, looks like we're moving on. Thank you very much. We are on item number 5, discussion and possible action on the water and wastewater 2023 to 2027 capital improvement plan.
So we prepared the CIPs for 2023 through 2027. We did leave the 2022 projects on there just so you could see where that is. The first one is the drinking water division. The first page is what is proposed for borrowing. The second page is what would be funded out of operating that we're anticipating right now for projects. As you can see, for the water, look, about 2.4 million is proposed to be borrowed. About 1.1 million of that is for street projects that are proposed for 23.
Any comments or questions?
I'm happy to bring back any information too on specific projects if the commission would like it at future meetings. You know, anything that might help. I
Mr.
know.
Robinson?
So in lieu of the inflationary pressures, both on bituminous and other things, is you replace water and sewer when you do road reconstruction. So how are these, is this a realistic list, given some of the inflationary
Yeah.
pressures?
Yeah, so engineering went through these just a couple of weeks ago with current pricing, and I think right now, it's the best knowledge that we have for pricing right now. I think it's more of it's gonna be, when we order, it's another item on the agenda today, but we feel right now, engineering was comfortable with these prices, so we made some adjustments from last year. Yeah.
Anyone else? Mr. Jean?
I would, in lieu of the time we got quite a bit of an agenda, I would like to carry this over for the next meeting, and maybe I'll talk directly with staff on a few questions that I have. So,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Yep.
Is everyone comfortable moving this agenda item to the next one? Okay.
If any commissioners have any questions on this or need more information, if they just want to reach out to me, I'd be happy to provide it at the next meeting too, so.
Could I just,
Mr. Bruce.
excuse me, could I just ask a question about the future well? What are we talking about there? Is that a well to attempt to get a well that's not contaminated?
No, I don't
No.
think that's going to be the intent at all. That's going to be for future water supply, increased supply, and then we were anticipating possibly getting rid of well 3, or not using water from well 3 for water supply. So if we had increased consumption and increased demand and needed a new well, that was the budget for that.
Okay.
Okay.
Currently, we're not going to be allowed to get rid of well 3 or not use it not be able to not treat it, I should say.
Right.
All right. With that, we will move on to item number 6, discussion and possible action on contracting water and sewer locates for Wausau Waterworks.
Scott, I'll let you
Sure.
lead this one off.
Just back to staffing issues, time-wise, resources, changing in our operations. We're replacing a lot more lead services, doing a lot more sampling, trying to do a lot more other things that are required from DNR. With the amount of locates we're getting, it would be a low-hanging fruit to free up some resources to make us available to do other items. So we were looking at RFPing this project and bringing it back to commission for approval.
Mr. Robinson?
How many multiple locates are we doing where people, they call in to diggers and they get the locates, and those are a time-sensitive locate, and if they don't begin the work, how many, what's the repeat nature of those requests?
I'm not sure what the repeat is. We're required to do the repeats if requested. I don't know that number, splitting them out. It hasn't been worth the staff time to try to separate those. The staff that does them will know if it's a repeat, and generally it's a lot easier to check it and/or just remark it if necessary.
Are we seeing an exacerbation of those, do you know, due to supply side issues?
I don't know about supply side issues. I know it depends on, it's usually contractor specific. We do have discussions with contractors. If we have a repeating issue with them, we try to get them just to call us directly and/or do specific sites if necessary.
Mr. Force?
Is this still associated with the TDS project?
There are several drops, but we do have another fiber company coming into town. I do not know the name of that, but they are starting to request some more of those. Also with the expanded cellular, G5 and G6 are going to require microsites, which are also going to require fiber to be buried in the ground. So it's going to be continual, and I think it's going to increase as we go forward.
Why is this cost not borne by the contractor?
It's
Is this just traditional, the way we do it?
no, it's set up in state statute. It's part of the operating. I don't know what you would call it, operating structure of having a public utility.
Seems like it's becoming a significant burden.
It's
And
it's
it
a
can't be
major.
just on us, it's got to be burdening other utilities who are also facing cost increases
Correct.
and staffing shortages.
Some companies, some utilities are just not doing them, which is opening themselves up to a lot of liability and repairs. And the 2 employees is not a real fair picture of this either, because our busy season, when we're digging, when we're flushing, when we're doing this, is when these companies are working as well. So some days we're getting as many, I think our high day this year was 199
Wow.
tickets in one day. So we have 6 to 8 staff. If we even have them in that day, everybody's out doing locates. So that takes care of our dig jobs, takes care of any other work we would.
No,
be
you don't
doing
have to
that day.
describe the problem, I'm imagining it accurately. Is it worth going after the statute
Yes.
and maybe suggesting the state look at it and make a change?
I think we could do that too.
That's
In
what I'd
addition to this.
recommend.
Mr. Robinson?
I would move to authorize staff to begin working on developing an RFP for contracting out water and sewer.
All right, we have a motion by Robinson and a
Locates.
second by Jean. Any further discussion here, other than we would also like to talk to our representatives about this?
Just I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
just a question on cost. So we contract this out, what are we looking at in terms of cost?
I had an inquiry to a company that does this in the spring of '21. They do a per ticket price, plus there's another price for those tickets that last more than a half hour. Then they have emergency locate during business hours and after business hour fees. I tried to run some scenarios somewhat to what our tickets are. We're probably looking in the range of about $180,000 a year.
But we expect to get that dialed in on the RFP when people respond.
Correct.
Any further discussion? All of those in favor of approving, oh my goodness, the RFP for contracting water and sewer locates for Wausau Waterworks can signify by saying aye. 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 Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. You're now on to item number 7, discussion and possible action on approving a budget and proposal with Donahue and Associates for the engineering design of a granular activated carbon treatment process for the drinking water treatment facility.
I'm going to step out of the meeting
Okay.
during this discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, do we want Donahue to kick us off, or do we want,
Sure.
all right,
Yeah,
we are ready for you.
I can, Susan. This is the task order number 3 from Donahue to get us started for the GAC design process for treatment of PFAS. This brings us all the way through bidding, correct? Yes.
It also includes assistance with, I'm sorry, Susan Watkowitz, Donahue and Associates, also includes assistance with funding and safe drinking water loan application, and then also providing support for the federal appropriation that you've applied for through Senator Baldwin's office.
Great.
Mr. Robinson?
So is this a time and material contract?
It's more of it's itemized out, I would say.
But are those fixed cost for those activities, or are they time and material within those
So
areas?
it is essentially a time and material contract. That's the way it's set up. We're charging hourly with a not-to-exceed cost provided. As Eric said, the contract is broken into specific tasks, and, we've given you costs for design, bidding, funding, those various tasks.
Mr. Robinson?
So I had some questions relative to the bench scale pilot in light of, we had this discussion before the meeting, but we'll have it again. And I guess my concern is continuing the need for and the cost of continuing the bench scale pilot. If I know we're trying to look at when breakthrough will occur, and the pilot bench scale test is limited value to the real world experience, and we know we're going to have to replace it when it breaks through, irrespective of what the bench scale study tells us, and we'll have to monitor and we'll have those costs, because at the end of the day, we're trying to provide the citizens with safe drinking water. So are there some opportunities for us to realize some savings in the area of scaling back, eliminating, or modifying the bench scale study to again save the ratepayer some dollars?
So the reason we have it in there is to continue the study. There are some other media that I think we've talked a little bit about, for example, Fluorosorb, which is another media that overall potentially could have cost savings. For example, if you were to go with GAC, have GIC on startup, the data we would be collecting, one of the things we'd be collecting with the pilot study is information on using Fluorosorb, which in the future could have a very significant savings for, you'd basically switch from the granular activated carbon to the Fluorosorb media.
How would those?
And that's as an example, that's one of the places where the pilot study would assist us.
And how would those savings be realized? Through less media, lower regeneration costs?
Lower media cost overall. The Fluorosorb itself is lower in cost than granular activated carbon.
Mr. Robinson?
So where is the Fluorosorb relative to other contaminants of concern? So is the Fluorosorb limited in its ability to pull out the PFAS? I think one of the discussions that we had at our last meeting was our desire to have more of a permanent fix, and GAC gives you
Correct.
that. So
Correct.
what are the characteristics of Fluorosorb? Because if it is limited in its application to a contaminant of concern, it doesn't address, I think, the wish of this commission that we made based on the motion that we made at the last.
Sure, and I'm just giving you that as an example. We would also continue looking at granular activated carbon. I think I'm going to ask Andrew to step in and just talk briefly about the Fluorosorb and the desires with the pilot study. Andrew, can we bring him online?
But again, no offense, we made a statement at our last meeting that we wished to go ahead for the purposes of protecting the citizens of this community with a granular activated treatment system. And the purpose of that granular activated treatment system was to deal with all of the flavors of the months, not just one, but to try to future-proof our water treatment system. I don't want us spending money on doing pilot studies on a flavor of the month response. So if the desire is to use fluorabsorbed for a targeted contaminant of concern, I don't think that's the direction that the commission wanted. I think it's just a matter of time before the next UCMR study comes out with the next emerging contaminant, and we're going to have to deal with it. I think we were looking for a more permanent
Right.
solution.
And can I give Andrew an opportunity to answer that question about the characteristics of Fluorosorb?
Sure.
Sure. And, yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Andrew Dow with Donahue. I think to back up for a moment, I'll just relay, I think there are three objectives that we see right now, or potential benefits of continuing the pilot study. So I'll kind of talk about each of those in sequence and in order of importance. The first one would be if we can continue to at least operate the pilot column of the regenerable Thermax ion exchange resin that will be used at the new plant, we'll continue to get more information about the performance and behavior of that resin and that process when the new plant is operating, to understand how that performance changes over time, if at all, and at what point it does or does not continue to provide some beneficial reduction in PFAS concentrations in the treated water. The second potential objective or value item that comes out of continuing the pilot is specifically with respect to the GAC column. We're in discussions with DNR about making some adjustments to the flow rate to that column with the benefit of better simulating the breakthrough curve through that column, and allowing us to do that because our pilot column is much shorter in depth than the full-scale beds would be. We can actually get to a point potentially in the coming months where we can start to collect breakthrough data and establish a breakthrough curve for the PFAS constituents of interest. And that will be the most reliable, short of full-scale operation, that would give us the most reliable information about the actual operating costs and carbon usage rate that would determine the utility's long-term operating costs with that media and with that treatment strategy, which would, of course, affect the rate, the revenue requirements and the user rates that would be required to support the incorporation of the GAC treatment. But from a design standpoint, the philosophy has been centered around implementing and designing for GAC treatment, lead lag operation, making sure that that is the focus and that that is a strategy that can be accommodated, and only giving consideration where practical to just the flexibility that might be maintained to change out to other media that are available in the future if those prove to offer beneficial cost savings, and only if the GAC is not required to meet other treatment objectives. But the focus would certainly be on the GAC. And then just the third potential benefit of continuing the pilot was the opportunity to collect some data on the performance of the Fluorosorb media. There's a supplier who is willing to lend the city pilot equipment and samples of the media at no charge. So the only cost to the city at that point would be the analytical fees for the monthly samples that would be collected to measure the effluent concentrations from the pilot column. And that, of course, would be a discussion item about whether there's a desire to pursue that or not. But that would be the only cost impact of looking at the Fluorosorb, and we would propose not continuing to test some of the other columns, like the ion exchange columns that would not provide breakthrough data, because then that could offset the cost of the Fluorosorb data. So that was a third and less important priority, but it was an opportunity to take advantage of the pilot testing setup that's in place and collect data that might be, of value to the city, just to understand, options moving forward.
Thank you. Question, follow-up?
I guess I continue to be concerned about our cost.
Sure.
In we are hemorrhaging costs associated with trying to deal with our PFAS issue. And knowledge is always wonderful, but the question is who pays for it. And I think we're looking at some significant increases in cost associated with whatever system we go with. And, I guess I'm not, I thought we made a decision moving forward to give Scott the ability to sleep at night and not worry about the flavor of the month. And that we're doing that with GAC. And I think we can look at other people's studies. I'm not averse to looking at this as a pilot if we can find a different funding source. Are there funding sources? We had that discussion whether or not DNR and others might be willing to invest in some of these pilots to get that baseline information. But for us to ask the taxpayers or the ratepayers to do it is tough at this time, because we're looking at a lot of other costs. And if we're going with GAC with the lead lag system and it's proven effective, and we know that there are pharmaceuticals and other things that are on the horizon relative to needing to be addressed going in the future, I thought we were taking a conservative approach, but I'm not understanding the value of a one-dimensional treatment in a bench scale pilot in dealing with the long-term needs of the utility.
Susan, I don't recall our approval letter for our pilot study. DNR is going to also require us to run that for an extended period of time, just so they have an understanding before they approve the system that we add onto the plant. I don't recall what that time frame was on our approval. We'd have to
I would have to look that up.
But, maybe we bring this discussion back
Yeah, we
after
could certainly pull
do
that out.
And we can also have discussions with DNR, because they're
Yeah.
going to want to have extended looks at how this GAC is working with our water specifically anyway, before they approve any system goes on to what we have already.
Right. And we do have a technical memorandum ready to go. Donahue has assembled it, drafted it, pulled all the data together regarding the pilot study. We've given Wood an opportunity to review and provide input. We're ready to now share that with the city. I just know there's been a lot of things going on for city staff in the last couple of days. I'll be reviewing it tomorrow, and we'll be issuing that information. So we are at a point with the pilot study, we have information sort of ready, packaged up to go. And so we could have that discussion, Scott, with DNR. We could certainly pull the pilot study piece out of this contract at this point and revisit it depending on what requirements we have from DNR.
I wonder too if there's an opportunity. It feels like 5 years since I've had these conversations started, but we were talking to the University in Milwaukee, and maybe there's an opportunity to transition or work with some of them on some of this programming too. So
Right, and the other place I think I would look, Mayor, is Department of Administration and DNR through the funds that they've had allocated for emerging contaminants and the Safe Drinking Water Loan Program. Perhaps there would be a specific allocation they could help make, because this information would be not only valuable to the city, but also to, I think, the department and other communities as we move forward.
definitely, I just got introduced to the new DOA secretary. I think she'd be interested in having a discussion.
Okay, awesome.
Cool.
And we met a couple of staff members from DOA yesterday, who's specifically working with emerging contaminants. So
Awesome.
maybe we can put our heads together.
Yes, let's do it. Okay, next. Any other comments, concerns, motions? Mr. Robinson?
Well, I'm willing to move ahead with the approving the budget and the proposal, and I think with placing the pilot study on hold pending our discussions with DNR and others.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do I have a second for that one? I have a second by Ms. Herbst. Any further discussion or questions that need to be answered? Otherwise, all of those in favor of approving the budget and proposal with Donahue Associates for the engineering design of a granular activated carbon treatment process for the drinking water treatment facility, with the understanding that we will put the pilot project on hold after some conversations with the DNR, if that's allowed, can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, that passes
Excellent.
unanimously. I'm
Thank
just
you.
going to wait a second, and maybe we can get our wayward commissioner back in. Thank you.
Could I just make a comment on Fluorosorb?
Yes, sir.
The advantage here would be lower cost.
Yeah, for the media
We would know
itself.
nothing about upcoming contaminants because I don't see anything in the literature that's been tested on anything but PFAS.
Correct. But there would be information coming from our pilot study for the contaminants that we have present.
Would the manufacturer of Fluorosorb be willing to bear the cost of the pilot study?
It's another
That-
discussion we
that's
can
a-
probably have.
Yeah, we're certainly willing to ask that.
Just a thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. I like it when we can get capitalism to pay for capitalism. All right. We're moving on to item number 8, discussion on the drinking water treatment facility construction and update on the testing/startup. Who wants to hit that?
I'll
Okay.
start it off.
Thank you.
We also have Steve with Becker Hoppy here, too. So this project began in June of 2020. We've been moving through the project. Project has, construction is fairly well set. We're kind of moving into hopefully startup phase here pretty soon. Pretty soon having water flowing through the plant. But we did have some delays with some fitting issues and some other things. So we do expect a delay from the August 16th substantial completion date. And I'll let Steve take it from
Sure.
there. Okay?
Again, Steve Opatic, Becker Hoppy. I'm the project manager for the engineering team overseeing the construction.
Is your cell phone right next to the mic? Is somebody's cell phone over here next to a mic? It might be mine. I think it's mine. Sorry.
Okay. So yes, as Eric alluded to, I'll just back up and give you a little bit of history of where we've been. Not very long. You can refer back to all of your previous facility updates or construction updates in there, and then talk a little more in detail about what is happening now and why we think we're going to be delayed a little bit. As Eric mentioned, we started this project in June 25th of 2020, which pick however long ago you want to say that, but this one stuck out at me. That was 106 weeks ago. And that was the peak of COVID. And the contractor, the engineering team, the owner, everybody, I believe actually there's a couple representatives of Myron Construction here too. We've all worked together to work through those challenges, from COVID and just the peak of that, all the other things we know about shipping and delivery, staffing, worker shortages, not only associated directly with COVID, but then the boost in the economy coming out of it and all of the supply chain issues that have been experienced. This project certainly hasn't been immune to those, but we've been able to navigate through them. In the fall of 2020, we did encounter what is essentially an unprecedented issue where we ran into a problem with coatings on the ductile iron fittings that were provided. There's been summaries or been information about this in your summaries. That required an extensive remediation by the contractors that started in the late February, early March timeframe. And that contractor just left the site in early June. I believe June 3rd was their last day on the project. Work was able to continue while that was going on, but the delay was as we couldn't really start running water through the plant until that work and then the subsequent coating work was completed. So once that was done, the contractor was able to start his actual startup and commissioning procedure where they bring in their vendors, start the pumps, make sure the power rotation is going well, and get everything prepared to a point where they begin the commissioning process, where they run the entire system in earnest. And that commissioning process they break the system into 20 different phases, and each one of those must operate for 7 days continuously without delay. Since the June timeframe, when we've started this, we've run into a couple of issues. I would call them normal startup issues: pressure testing a pipe, finding a rolled gasket, pipe leaking, have to dig it up, redo your bacteria testing, and all of the things associated with that. We meet weekly on the project with the contractors. We get a 8-page schedule from the contractors that's updated generally on a weekly basis. So we've been tracking this very carefully all the way through. We had some margin in our project from when originally we were going to start up in commissioning, and before our August 16th substantial completion date. Much of that was taken up with our ductile iron fitting remediation, and with the contractors looking at, this is how we can, tighten up and slim up our schedule. We've gotten to a point where this is the bare minimum we need to complete the work. Seeing with a couple of the hiccups now, understanding some of the handoffs that have to occur between controls and getting equipment running. Our last look at the schedule is that we likely won't be running the plant in earnest until the end of September, looking at like a 4-week time frame. That's using an aggressive schedule with minimal ability for, we have an issue, we've got to order a part, the part is delayed for 4 weeks, and then we have to put it in. Those sorts of things that we understand at this time. It's unfortunate news. I'm bringing this at a time, I know we're a month out from where we wanted to be. We've been working throughout the time to try and make this schedule work. And just as we got through June, it became apparent, and this is our first opportunity to make you aware of. We're probably 4 to 6 weeks behind that August 16th date.
Any questions from commissioners? I see some. Mr. Robinson.
So I guess that given the fact that we're trying to reduce the PFAS in there, are there any opportunities for us to accelerate that work, or what's the best case in this? Is, I assume, hopefully the midpoint. Are there opportunities for us to accelerate, to be ahead of that 4 to 6 weeks if things fall in place, stars align?
I could have Myron step up. Our last schedule, and it was a best case, was September 21st, I believe.
Yeah, so I'm Matt Fry with Myron. So as far as acceleration, the unfortunate situation that we're in now is we've kind of, as Steve alluded, we've chewed up a lot of what we would say is the fluff in the schedule, or right? So we're now down to the perfect schedule, the perfect storm to finish this up. So it's tough for us to work miracles. 2 years ago, we'd say we can call the right guy and we can get the right part in 24 hours. In this situation that we live in right now, it's virtually impossible, and we're just dealt this hand of not being able to get certain things. As of what we know right now, there's some, again, moving parts that we haven't confirmed yet. It's just, we're really tied to the procurement and when we can get things and when we can work this through. So unfortunately, it's not about working around the clock at this time. It's now just working the things through the systems. We are anticipating that there might be something, right, that would pop up, and that we just got to react to that, and we'll try to communicate that up the chain.
Any further questions? I see Mr. Force reaching for his
Yeah. We received a copy of a letter maybe 2 weeks ago, regarding this dispute over the pipe fittings. And
Yes,
okay. I didn't know what to make of it. Is there action that I should be aware of as a commissioner, or has the matter been settled, taken care of? Are the lawyers
I might
paid
let
and
Eric
happy?
respond. He's on the Board of Public Works,
Yeah.
and I think they just,
Well, yeah,
So typically, these projects, when they get under contract, the Board of Public Works manages them on a
Okay.
day-to-day. And so the board, along with legal counsel and working with Myron and the engineers, we've been working through the issues in accordance with the contract. And so, there has been additional retainage held from the contract there, until these things have gotten done. And I think we're on the tail end of it. Has it been fully resolved, Jim? No, not yet, but it's in the works
so
legally.
basically, we were just copied as an FYI.
That's correct. And we
Okay.
wanted, just because it has gotten to the point that we're in a construction delay now, we just want to make sure that all the commissioners are aware. We know the importance of this. Again, this is over a 2-year construction project, and we're right now looking at a month behind,
Yeah.
which, is not unusual for this size of a project, but we also want to make sure that when this goes online, this is extremely important, that this is safe drinking water going out to the community, and everything has to be operational, and it all also has to be signed off by the DNR. So all of these
Correct.
processes need to be working, so.
And just one other comment. My information is very anecdotal, and I apologize for that, but I compliment our design firm for the internal communication that's apparent in the documents that you've given us between the contractor, the engineer, the client. All of the customary internal communications seem to have been well planned. On the outside of the project, I'm not convinced that the neighborhood was adequately, fully engaged and informed about the project. And that simply comes from conversations that I've had with neighbors there, including friends of mine and the neighborhood association, and my attendance at the public meetings. I don't think this would be written up as a case study of successful public communications regarding a project of this size, and I would just hope that we do better the next time.
And I guess my one response would be I'd be happy to learn more details and specific about them. It's something we do meet on a weekly basis. We've had some adjacent property owners that we've worked with and called with, but in terms of information that has been communicated to us on the project, whether it be a noise complaint or coordination, or we've been digging up the roads to do some repairs in those areas, all things that certainly impact residences and what's going on in the middle of them. We really haven't heard any, so we would certainly like to know them, and would anything we can do to help ameliorate, wrong word, help address them.
Well, it's pretty much past the time now. Hopefully,
Okay.
we're on the final stretch, but
Yes.
I'd be happy to talk with you about
Yes.
that. Sure.
Thank you.
anyone else? Mr. Jean?
I just want to share my early times of my career. I was part of a startup of was a $72 million plant. And if anybody thinks it's going to happen overnight, I'm sorry to say that's not going to be the case. It took over a year with that facility, and I left to come and work for the city of Wausau now. So we certainly all wanted it to happen perfectly on time. That I didn't surprise me at all that might slip a little bit.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much. All right, we are moving on to item number 9, discussion and possible action for early ordering of piping, oh my goodness, and appurtenance materials for 2023 street reconstruction projects.
So this is related to our 2023 street construction projects, and TJ has some information. He also had a
Thank you.
memo in the packet for you on what we're proposing to do. The information he's handing out, I think we just received today, correct, TJ?
We received the pricing yesterday.
Yesterday.
All right, so TJ Nixich, I'm project engineer for the city. So as I'm sure you're aware, and as I stated in our memo, There's a long lead time for water main and water main materials, so we're looking at ordering these materials now to get ahead of the curve and hopefully receive the materials so we can start our projects on time next year. So with that, we reached out to two of the main suppliers in the area, Core and Main and Ferguson, similarly to the way we did when we made our material order earlier this year in January. So the way they delivered their quotes was a little different, but they were both had the same premise. Ferguson delivered their quotes with different delivery times. If it gets delivered this year, if it gets delivered between January and July of next year, and then anything after July. Core and Main simply stated that, they're gonna get the materials to us between January and April. That is also when Ferguson believes they're gonna be able to get the material to us, but they just wanted to show it as a comparison because it's well known that they're going to be receiving price increases as we move forward, which was the same thing that Core and Main stated. As you can see in my notes below, Core and Main included the 7 to 10% increase in that one cost to be delivered by April, whereas Ferguson, sort of spaced that out given the delivery dates. Also, one difference is the city of Wausau specifies class 50 ductile iron water main. That is a thickness class, and it goes up from there. So class 50 and then class 52 is a little bit thicker of a water main. So class 50 is a cheaper water main because it's thinner, but it's also not as common. Many communities either go with a pressure class 350 or a class 52, whereas the city specifies class 50, so it's not as readily available, which probably attributed to some of the delays that we experienced this year. But Core and Main believes that next year it may not even be an option to get class 50 because class 52 is just so widely used. The manufacturers aren't going to be switching back and forth. They're just going to be spitting out as much as they can when they can. So in Core and Main's price, they specified class 52 because they believe that's what is going to be available. So I will leave it at that and let Eric and Scott discuss a little bit on what their thoughts are, and if you have any questions.
Thank you.
TJ, before you go, you were handling most of the procurement of the piping this year and overseeing the invoices and supplies, correct?
Correct.
Who was our supplier this year?
We had Ferguson.
Okay. Ferguson did supply us with non-domestic parts in lieu of our domestic spec in a lot of areas, correct?
There were some parts mixed in, yeah, some that wasn't expected. Largely the bolts, I guess, was the only one that they actually knew about that they provided to us. And we just assumed everything was American made, so we didn't go through every single piece of material to confirm. But that's coming back to bite us. I just talked to Shannon earlier, and because American bolts aren't readily available, we have to take what's on the shelf, and I think that's like a $15,000 ad just to get the bolts that are American made.
And Ferguson was granted, we were purchasing the items from Ferguson. They were unable to get some of the items that we had specified, and if we didn't get parts from Core and Main, would we have been able to start any of our street reconstruction projects this year?
Ferguson was always, they're at the mercy of the manufacturer. I would say Core and Main probably worked harder to look for more materials, but neither company would have been able to, get new materials in a timely fashion, whereas Ferguson, they were willing to get us non-domestic materials that could probably allow us to finish the project quicker, which they did in one instance where because 18-inch diameter pipe isn't as common, so that piece of material got pushed back until middle of August when we're supposed to have a plant up and running. So we did get the domestic cross, but then when we were going to piece that together just 2 weeks ago, that cross broke upon installation. So Core and Main was able to get us some materials to help us through that issue.
I think Core and Main, with the issues we've had with Ferguson, I mean, we use American iron and steel. That's what we use. Tolerances are much better. Everything matches up. Some of the funding sources we have require it. And the fact that we specified it, but we didn't get it, you know, we should get what we specify. And that was a problem this year. And if staff we would like to go with Core Main this year for ordering these materials. The other thing that should be noted too is we did go with Ferguson last year. We ordered those pipe materials based on the price that they gave us, but when they came to us and the pipe was ready, we had to pay a surcharge on that piping. And so, which, you know, because they don't guarantee the prices. And so we ended up paying more for the pricing that we had. Otherwise, they would have just sold it to somebody else. So that's kind of the situations that we're in right now. So.
Mr. Robinson?
So how does this fit with the overall purchasing policy? You know, these are good until we write them down, and then they're not good anymore. You know, so don't we have the ability, you know, do we sign a contract when we place an order and it's subject to their whims?
Yeah, I mean, like Core Main, you know, has said that they've included the 7 to 10% increase in the prices that they're showing here, right? And if the increase is not applied, then they'll pass that savings along, right? So, but yeah, I mean, we don't sign a contract. All we do is establish a PO with them to show that we ordered the material so it can get on order, and then when it's delivered, that's when we pay for it.
So there are three issues here. One is quality, and you deal with that in the context of, you know, you specify American-made products and you hope you get them. The second one is delivery date and schedule.
Yep.
And the third one is price. So when you don't pick the low qualified proposer, how do you justify that in light of those three criteria?
I would say past experience, you know, because that one cross fitting, if Core Main wasn't able to get those parts for us, that project would have been delayed until August, getting that pipe up and running. And so the fact that we were delivered, you know, a foreign made material, and then that when they tried to put it in, the flange cracked anyway. So it's not like we could have put it in temporarily. It just broke.
Was that a Ferguson supplied?
Yes.
Do we have recourse against them because they didn't provide a specified material?
A little bit more context with that cross. That cross was delayed. You know, we found out that our project was starting in June, and that cross kept getting delayed, and then they gave us a date of August 15th, I believe, for delivery, and we said that's just too late. We'll go with the non-domestic just because this is so important that we get up and running. So we told Ferguson to get us the non-domestic cross. So then they canceled the cross that we had on order that was domestic. So then, you know, then that flange broke on the cross. So it's not something, you know, Ferguson didn't deliberately deliver a non-domestic cross to us. We asked for that just so that we could get that water main in.
But then the bolts.
Right, the
they
bolts.
did deliver those.
We've got a couple of mega lugs and then a couple of gaskets also that were mixed in with all the other materials.
So has the Board of Public Works weighed in on this? And
No. You know, our yeah, I mean, we can certainly bring it to the Board of Public Works, but this is, you know, this is unusual, right? For us to order things a year early, and hopefully that we can get them in. So and it's a procurement policy type issue. Like, we've done this on other projects and for materials, but we brought it to finance because they weren't utility related. And so, and on vehicles, we've done it like that too, but it's outside the procurement policy. So that's why it's here in front of you. It really, you know, what we're asking for is that we would be able to order these materials, and then we could bring it to the Board of Public Works for a decision on which one to go with. But really the question is the commission okay with us obligating money, even though we're not writing the check yet, to order these early so that we can, outside the procurement policy?
Mr. Robinson?
I would move to authorize staff to begin the process of soliciting material for the 2023 construction season.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Jean?
Just of the issues that we've experienced, if the contractor was buying the materials, we would be removed from that. So we have to remember, although I don't think we have any choice, we are taking on some more liability, because they could put a pipe in the ground and they can't get a pressure test, and they got to go find it and dig it up. I think we're going to be held partly responsible for that. So it'd be better that we weren't doing this, but I don't think we have a choice. So we have to keep that in mind for future. We'd hope things kind of go back to stabilizing normal, because I don't think we get a price break, at least with tax. I think the contractor usually gets a better price for pipe, whether it's passed on to us as for the project. But I didn't see any plastic pipe. Are we doing that with plastic too for sewer?
We haven't had an issue with PVC.
Oh, we haven't had an issue. Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Was that motion to go with Core and Main, just for clarification? Or
No,
was that
we'll
just
bring it to the board
Okay.
for a decision on a supplier. Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion to authorize staff to move forward with early ordering of piping for street reconstruction projects. All in favor can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you. We are now on to item number 10, discussion and update on proposed solar array for the drinking water treatment facility.
Yeah, so I provided a short update again when I said it was to the Wausau Waterworks and prepared in consultation with Donahue. It was not prepared in consultation with Donahue. The solar project, you know, was really, with everything going on over the last 6 months, was kind of put to the side. Some work was being done in the background by Clark Dietz, with some concepts put together based on the public information meetings, as well as gathering some information on the site as the commission directed previously when we talked about this. Doing some test pits, trying to determine if any areas up on the north side would work for the additional arrays. I think, you know, our next step, and I had talked with Paul Svetlek, who is the neighborhood group leader over there, about setting up another public information meeting. We haven't set a date yet. I would anticipate where we're at, and Tanya's here too, so she can correct me if I'm wrong, but we'll try to set that date up over the next month to get in, present some options with a smaller array, some concepts that we had talked about, a couple different options, and then bring that back to the commission probably in September for determination.
Mr. Force.
And I'm assuming these renderings have to do with the neighborhood concerns about what they're looking at and what they might be hearing.
Yeah.
The same concerns that we heard.
Yeah.
I would make a suggestion. I know back in December, we talked about setting up a work group to kind of work out some of those issues. I'm not sure that ever took place.
Nope.
And we have some renderings. Would it make any sense to try to assemble a group of 4 or 5 people? I mean, we know basically who they are. They're the close-by neighbors. They were the ones who were here at that meeting, to get their feedback on what we're going to, what we're proposing before we take it to a public meeting. wouldn't it be nice to know that the neighbors think this is okay? And they're
we
in
certainly
favor of it
can.
before we
Yeah.
present it to the whole neighborhood group? Because we might get the same reaction we got before, which is they don't like this, they don't like that, and we're back to square one.
But I think at some point, right, like, and we can certainly do that, Jim. I'm not opposed to that. I can set that up. I can pass those out and then set a meeting with those. Even if I had to meet with them individually, that's fine with me to get their input before the public information meeting. I guess the one question is, staff's recommendation would be to continue to move forward with it. I mean, even if the neighborhood isn't fully supportive of it, because I think it's such a huge benefit for the city as a whole. And so, but we could definitely bring that information back.
Well, I agree with you. It's a huge benefit for the city, and I've been advocating this ever since I've been on this board. I want to see it succeed. That's why I suggest we talk about it again today. But I want it to be successful, and I want it to be acceptable to those folks who are going to be living across the street from it. I'd like to see us get beyond that obstacle, that barrier. I'd like to see us get their buy-in, so that everybody sees it as a positive, winning project. I would just hate to go to a public information meeting and have more of the same kind of reaction that we had before, and then we're coming back and we're trying to redesign something that would be acceptable. It just seems like a good first step would be to meet with that group and say, these are the concepts that we've come up with. What works for you? And whatever that is, then that's what we present at the public information meeting.
Mr. Robinson.
Well, I agree with the general thrust of that. I think that we want to ask them, what are your concerns versus what works for you? Because we're not, the commission hasn't taken a stand on this. We've been talking about it. And I just urge caution in relaying anything else saying the commission supports, because we're still in that fact-finding stage. And I think we also don't want to delegate our responsibility to others. I think we're looking for input, but ultimately the decision will have to come back here, so.
Well, that's just a semantic thing, John. Yes, I agree with you.
It's important. It's important. Yeah.
I agree with you.
Thank you.
But I would hope that when we roll it out, that it's rolled out from the perspective that the commission hasn't acted. We're still in that exploratory stage, so there's an opportunity for that input.
Yeah, I think that's been, what we've tried to do at the information meetings is, it's an iterative process, right? So, you present the idea and the concepts. I mean, that's what, and so and you're right. I mean, the commission hasn't. I mean, they're still gathering information from costs all the way down to what this is going to look like in the size and life cycle costs. So, and that's how it'll be presented, John. I think that's well taken. But yeah, I will work with those individuals that have come, and then we'll have a public information meeting, after we have a chance to do that. Okay?
Mr. Jean.
I just want to be sure whatever we're planning, allow for the footprint for the carbon units, that we're not in conflict with that, that's all.
The new GAC system?
Right. Yeah, we would not be.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll also say that I've had some interesting conversations with folks that are interested in partnering in other ways with the solar project too. So that could be a new opportunity that we couldn't have considered last year.
It's awesome.
Okay. All right, we're moving on. Thank you, everyone. Item number 11, discussion on the one-time charge for a connection fee to the city's wastewater collection system.
Yeah, this is something that I've looked into. So as you remember, when we were going through the projects, we had worked with Marathon City as well as the Village of Maine about, centralizing wastewater treatment. And you couldn't really get buy-in from the state to help out with funding, and without that, those two communities kind of backed away from that concept, unfortunately. I think the Village of Maine has approached us and asked us what it would be for a connection fee if they were to bring their wastewater to the city of Wausau. Our ordinance, typically what we have is we establish connection fees. Like if we have one house that annexes to the city, wants to connect to water and sewer, then we provide them a connection fee by, the footage of mainline pipe that's in front of their property. We divide that by half, assuming that a connection will be made on each side, right? So for the cost of that. But we don't have anything in our ordinance that relays if another community wants to connect, to establish that connection fee. So I had some conversations with legal on this. So how we did it was we treated it like it was one connection, but we treated it by averaging. I believe there's a 79 or 80 homes that are on that system. And we made the assumption that there was 100 feet of main line in front of each of those homes, assessed that value, by half, assuming one was on each side of the road, and came up with a connection fee. That was one part of the connection fee that I came up with. And that was, according to legal, looked, just fine as far as how the ordinance was written. The other part was we would typically charge a lift station fee for any wastewater that would run through one of our lift stations. And of course, this wastewater wouldn't go directly to the plant, it would run through a lift station. So for each of those properties I had, in the past, we've always charged right around $500 a connection for residential, so that's what I established for that. And that was fine as well. I brought this forward because, I wanted to let you know that discussion has been taking place with the Village of Maine. And two, is there something, I almost feel like there's something that maybe we should do to address this in the future? So it's more clear in the municipal code on how to establish what this fee would be. And I feel like we did it in accordance with how the code is written right now, but it would be nice if we had a section in the code that's specifically related to something like this, and we don't right now. So, yeah.
Mr. Robinson.
So our system is sewer lines, lift stations, and the distribution system and the treatment plant. And so are we recovering our cost, proportionate cost for that distribution system in the plant from those payers?
Yeah, so this is a one-time fee?
I realize that, but
okay.
we've got, you're buying into a system.
Yep.
You're buying into a system, and that system has had capital expenditures to get to that date certain. And those capital costs should be borne somewhat uniformly among all of the players. And so we depreciate plants and others, but I'm wondering if there shouldn't be a component that deals with, you can run it from Maine through a lift station, but then we have to create a larger sewer line to handle the increased volume. And it's not necessarily in front of that new subdivision coming in. It's part of the overall system. By creating a larger collection system, we have additional costs. Are we capturing those costs, and are there opportunities for us to capture those costs?
It's the responsibility of that municipality, in this case, the Village of Maine, to investigate our system and pipe sizes. And if any of those existing infrastructure needs to be modified to accommodate that flow, they would be responsible for those capital costs.
On the city side?
On the city side,
So
yes.
if we are increasing, if we have to go from the lift station and increase the capacity of that line, we would charge that?
That's
And
correct.
Are we then capturing the cost of our facility, proportionate cost of the facility for serving that? Or is that borne in the rates?
For the treatment plant, you
The
mean?
treatment plant?
Yeah, that would be within the rates that
But
we would charge them. Yep.
Okay.
The loading, the volume, yes.
I have a question. Are we mostly talking residential? And I don't know if it's different if we're also talking industry or something like that, but
Yeah, so the flows that come from the village would be residential.
Okay.
All similar. If we do some industry, then we would break it down to like an equivalent dwelling unit. And so if it was an industry, we would say that this flow and what they're using is equivalent to 10 homes, right? And then we would take a look at the strength of their wastewater and the constituents of it and see if we would have.
In pretreatment?
In pretreatment program, yes, yep.
Mr. Jean?
With the agreement we have with Schofield, I think that might be a good example you might want to share, that they contributed to the replacement of the siphon.
Yeah, yes, they did. They contributed for the siphon that went across from Memorial Park. They contributed 50% of that cost for that project.
Mr. For, oh, is that a follow-up for this? Okay, so Mr. Jean and then Mr. Force.
What we did when one of the contracts, we were adding in like a percentage of our budget for maintaining the sanitary sewers and building onto them. They didn't like that arrangement. Then I said, well, we'll take that out, but anytime we have to rehab a sanitary sewer that your sewage is flowing through, they had to contribute to that, and I think that's a good example. I didn't realize that till recently, that they had contributed quite a bit of money towards that siphon.
Mr. Force?
I agree with John and Joe on costs. We certainly don't want to be doing something that costs us more than is necessary. On the other hand, I see this as an opportunity. We don't have a long history in this area, all communities included, of working together, and this might be an opportunity to demonstrate that we can work together and provide a service to those residents in the village of Maine who need sewage treatment. It would also expand our ratepayer base a little bit, but I don't see anything wrong with that. So I'd like to see us come up with something, whatever it is, Eric, that works.
Great.
And doesn't turn a potential client away.
Yep.
I assume you're speaking with them regularly, and I would hope that those negotiations would be successful.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yep.
Any further discussion? Okay, looks like we took care of that item. The last item I have on our agenda is to adjourn. I would entertain a motion by Robinson, a second by Herbst. All those in favor can signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? We are adjourned. The next meeting is scheduled for August 2nd at 1:30, unless, of course, we have a special meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.